Hello everyone, this is William with CommanderCast.com doing another episode of the Alphabet with Avacyn, Guardian Angel. This time we are in Alliances. And we got some very nice supporting cards this week. Some of which are actually going to be very important just to get some redundancy in terms of removal. Some very small stuff, nothing big, nothing splashy. But we do get just a little bit better at interacting with our opponents and having answers. So let's go ahead and get right into it. The first thing I want to go ahead and point out here of some of the lands. I finally took out the Urzatron, which is good because we got at least two lands I wanted to replace them with, and honestly, I should have put in another Plains to replace one of those, but maybe I'm just being a bad player here. But I guess we're only running, I think, 36 or 35 Plains right now. It's probably really dangerous, but hopefully the lands I put in there will help make up for it. First one's going to be Keldorn Outpost. This was in Alliances, people. If Keldorn Outpost would enter the battlefield, sacrifice the Plains instead. If you do, it comes into the battlefield. If you don't, it goes straight to the graveyard. It taps to add 1 white to your mana pool. You can pay 2 and tap it. Put a 1/1 white soldier creature token onto the battlefield. Essentially 3 mana for a 1/1, which normally you wouldn't want to do that. But it's a consistent source of token making, so it's going to give us a little bit of a creature presence as long as we can see it. And I really like this Vintage Masters art, too. Very nice. Very high res. So Keldorn Outpost, I don't see this coming out anytime soon. We definitely need to increase our land count in the next week or so, just because this light land count. You see, we have 41 lands, but we also have to remember we have Maze of Ith, Diamond Valley, Bazaar Baghdad. So it's like 3 that aren't lands. That's going to put us down to 38. And then the second one doesn't make mana either, but does fetch us some lands, so maybe that will help. It's the Thawing Glaciers. So Thawing Glaciers enters the battlefield tapped. You can pay 1 and tap it to search your library for a basic land card and put that onto the battlefield tapped, and then you shuffle your library. And then Thawing Glaciers will go back to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next cleanup step. There used to be a trick where you can get a couple of lands out of this per round, where you'd go, okay, they're in this end turn, you go ahead, use the effect, and then it's not going to go back. So you untap on your turn, you use it again, it'll go back to your hand at the end of your turn, but now you've grabbed 2 lands for the 2 turns that you had that Thawing Glaciers out. Which kind of helps the tempo play. We're going to see if we can get that going today in our videos. See if it actually works on Moto or not. Hopefully it does. If I'm reading it, it might. It might. It says cleanup step, not end step. So we'll have to take a look. So going on to the actual spells here. Starting off with Reinforcements. For 1 mana to instant, put up to 3 target creature cards from your graveyard on top of your library. We don't have a lot of creatures. In fact, going through some of the cuts, we ended up cutting 3 creatures from the last week's list. Just because they were so small and slow. Pay 1, tap, give your creature first strike with the Catching Scout, or the Witch Hunter that constantly bounce their creatures, or the Archer. Let's face it, in our games, the times that we've been able to successfully get those guys to stick on board has almost never happened. It seems like every time we try and do that, there's either a wrath effect that happens, or they just get straight out killed, or it's not relevant, or we actually need to hold on to them for later because we're afraid of the board wipe happening. Like, what the actual hell? Why is it so hard for us to keep creatures out here? Well, Reinforcement is going to help fix that just a little bit. Even if we lose our creatures, there'll still be a way to get them back. It does, lock in our draw step for the next 3 turns, but it's an up to, so if we only want to use it to grab the 1 creature, we can't use it to grab the 1 creature. Land tax might shuffle them back in if we're using land tax. So, there we go. I mean, with the Bazaar Baghdad out too, it at least guarantees that we're drawing into some spells, I guess. It's just something that we need to to keep that creature count coming. I mean, if we lose creatures and then we can go, okay, well, we can make sure that the next 3 draws we have are creatures so we can rebuild our board again. That might not be the worst, especially if we have a Halley Mine out, because then it just means that we lock in 3 of our 4 cards, potentially. So, going to see how Reinforcements works out. Probably something that's going to end up getting cut once we get some more pure reanimation spells or anything, something like that. We've also got Inheritance, which is a nice little pickup. Inheritance, for 1 mana, you get an enchantment that says whenever a creature dies, you may pay 3. If you do, draw a card. So, one of the things that I liked about the Soulnet was that it was a, hey, here's a benefit for keeping your mana open, because you want to keep the mana open for Avacyn anyway. So here's a little something you can do with it in case something else goes bad. The problem was that 1 mana for 1 life is a really piddling exchange. You don't really want it. This is 3 mana, but it does let us draw a new card. So if we play Avacyn and we can't protect someone, then we can at least use that mana to go towards refilling our hand. So we're going to see how this works. It's not the most efficient thing by any means. 3 mana for every creature death is a lot. But 3 mana draw for half a divination is not the worst thing you can do. Anyway, the biggest thing that sells me on this is that the enchantment itself only costs 1. So we can draw this on turn 4, and if anything dies, we get to draw a new card and it replaces itself. If we just have certain plays and we don't want to keep any mana up, we can go ahead and drop it and then try and get it on the next turn. I feel like this is going to be one of those, it could be a pseudo 4-drop, and that we do want to play it with some amount of mana open. But that works out well with stuff like the Basalt Monolith too. It actually works out perfectly, because we can pay for it with the Basalt Monolith and keep our white mana open for our instance, like our Swords to Plowshares and stuff like that. Or even Avacyn's activation. And then if nothing dies, or we don't use Avacyn, we can just use that 3 mana to untap the Basalt Monolith. Inheritance and Basalt Monolith are probably going to be friends, I think. So going on to the next one, we have Reprisal. This is a surprising addition. Didn't realize this was in Alliances originally. Here you see the Journey into Nyx art. For 2 mana, it's a white instant. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. It can't be regenerated. So this is going to be really big for us. It's a 2 mana removal spell. It's basically going to be a Doomblade for this format, considering that a lot of what we have problems with are the bigger things. Right now, our deck is lacking in power. So this is going to help us quasi-match that power just by shooting down the big thing. The fact that they can't be regenerated means that they can't, there are going to be some creatures that have the ability to regenerate. I don't know. I can't actually remember how often regenerate ends up being. But still, 2 mana, basically Doomblade, anything power 4 or greater. With anything smaller, that's going to be annoying. But in theory, we should be able to be okay with that, considering how small our stuff is. I mean, we're still running stuff like the Knights of Thorn and Sarah Angel. Those things are ideally able to hold off anything that the Reprisal can't actually deal with. Plus, this is something that when it came out with Journey into Nyx, I actually didn't know it was a reprint. So I was like, oh, hey, cool, it's a 2 mana removal spell. And it's something I do actually play a little bit in the paper. This would be a nice test to see if it holds up, though, considering that it's one of our prime sources of removal right now. But it's going to go up against a whole gauntlet of efficient removal. I mean, you wouldn't play Path to Exile over... you wouldn't play this over Path to Exile, if you get my drift. Next one, it's going to be Errand of Duty. It's a 2 mana instant that says put a 1/1 white knight creature token with banding onto the battlefield. And then it's got a huge block of reminder text over what banding does. That's not the important part. The important part is that it's an instant speed banding card. So even if people know what banding does, which I don't know if they actually do or not, given our banding creatures don't see a whole lot of removal outside of just being creatures. People who know what banding does, though, I think they actually go out of the way to shoot off a Doomblade or whatever towards our banding guys. This one's a nice instant battle feature, but they can go, okay, all they have is Avacyn. Go ahead, swing in, 2 mana, Errand of Duty, 2 more mana, resistant to your color. Go ahead and block, shoot all the damage over to the token, and that has some nice synergy with like the populate mechanic. If this is still around by then. In fact, I may actually end up putting this on the watch list if we end up cutting it. But 2 mana, 1/1 banning, can turn into a 4 mana, just destroys something with 6 toughness or less. I think that's worth trying out. Plus, we're so low on creatures. We're down to 16 creatures right now that I want to try and maintain. I need to try and maintain a creature presence, first of all. The creatures have just been so unimpressive so far that I haven't wanted to include them in the deck over the more powerful spells. Because the deck needs card advantage and power. Those are the two. It's what we talked about last week and the week before, the week before that. Card advantage and power is going to be the measuring sticks for whether something can make it into the deck or not. So card advantage is going to be our removal and stuff like that. So we're going to trade 1 for 1 rather than watching a single card take up virtual card advantage by dealing us damage, by eating blockers, stuff like that. Power level. Errand Duty doesn't have the power level, but it might help us on that virtual card advantage level. So the next one is actually more of just a thematic cute card that it's right now it's sort of a pet card. Sustaining Spirit. It's a 2-mana Angel Spirit that's an 0/3. It's a cumulative upkeep of 2 mana. So cumulative upkeep meaning that's going to stack every time you place an age counter on it, which is every upkeep. So the first time to keep her around will be 2, then 4, then 6, then so on and so forth. But she has a really cool ability, which is damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1. Reduces it to 1 instead. Now she's an Angel Spirit. So I actually just like that. I have an affinity for cards that are both angels and spirits. I just think that's really cool and cute. And the Sustaining Spirit actually has a very relevant effect. We've gotten to those games where we need to, live. We just need to live, but Avacyn has just become so expensive. So Sustaining Spirit is going to help us in that role, but she's also one that we're not going to want to just throw out. She's more of a, hey, I'm going to try and help you hold on if you just need to live a couple more turns to get there. I can also see, the way that our games have also been going, it could just be we're desperately trying to hold on to something, as dying men and women do. But I don't know. It's a cute card, and I thought it would be fun to try out with. We only have 2 other cards there. Soul Grail, which is a 3-mana rock. As it enters the battlefield, choose a color. Add 1 mana of the chosen color to your mana pool. This is an obvious stand-in for Darksteel Ingot right now. But hey, it's only 3 mana, so the Mishra's Workshop basically makes it a 1-drop that makes 1 mana. And it doesn't enter the battlefield tapped. That is A-OK in my books. Will help us cast Avacyn the whole turn earlier. A lot of any of our mana rocks coming down 1 to 3 are going to be very helpful if they produce colored mana. Which, well, obviously, once again, the Mana Vault doesn't produce mana, but now we have some of the bigger stuff that we want to ramp into just a little bit. And finally, I think is the piece de resistance to our additions here for alliances. I mean, if the Thawing Glacier is the color outpost. No, I definitely think Exile is the best one that we have. So for 3 mana, it's an instant. Exile target non-white attacking creature. You gain life equal to its toughness. How about that? As long as it's not a white card, you can exile it, and then you're going to gain life equal to its toughness. That is really huge. And it's actually just exile. Straight. Boof. Gone. Shoot. So unless they've got a Rift Sweeper or a Pull from Eternities, they're not getting it back. And that is so great for us. Exile is the king of removal in Commander. So much so that I actually go out of my way to play sorcery speed, higher costing cards if they exile. Because there's so much recursion, so much power in being able to go Eternal Witness, get this thing back over and over again, that you just run out of ways to deal with them before they run out of ways to get it back. Exile effects, not just the card, but exile effects, are king at saying, no, we're done here. Time for us to move on. And that's really all that we have here for this deck. This adds power in a defensive measure. It doesn't add offensive power, which is really what I mean more when we're talking about actually creating a deck and actually having finishing potential. What we lack is finishing potential. You notice that there are a lot of games where if we just had a good strong finisher, the games would have been closed out a lot faster and a lot sooner. Right now we're staying into the game and we're gaining defensive power. Avacyn and Personal Incarnation are still our biggest ones as far as offensive power goes. And we're going to need much more offensive power. Fortunately, we are going to Mirage. And actually, Mirage is I believe Mark Roser has called Mirage the start of the second Age of Design. Where the first Age of Design, it's really more about the individual cards. It's all about coming up with a card that can do this. And a card that can do this. And a card that can do this. What is an angel? Let's go ahead and call it Sarah Angel because we have an idea about Sarah. It's not really connected to anything else in the block. With Alliance and Ice Age, and chronologies and anthologies and all that, and legends, there's a theme. There's kind of a common theme to tie it all together. Oh, these are all the legends of our D&D characters, or oh, this is the story of the Brothers' War told through artifacts of the past. It's much more of a card by card basis. And when we get to Mirage, it's going to be much more of a set basis, as in we're designing with everyone pulling towards a common set, as opposed to, oh, this one card is its own thing altogether. So that'll be very interesting. In fact, I may end up doing a compare and contrast video sometime between this and then, comparing what our deck looks like now to when we first started. It will be a very nice milestone. I was actually looking at that list last night, and it's actually very interesting to see that some of our most powerful cards, in terms of like just the creatures, are still the ones that were from Alpha. The Serra Angel, the Veteran Bodyguard, the Incarnation. But we'll have more on that when we get there. Until then, let's go ahead and go into game number 1. Stay tuned.